Hi there, welcome to the Schwowin's Nest. My name is Sandra, and I'm so glad you're here.
I'm starting out by using one of these little mini terracotta pots that you can get in a pack of 3 at the dollar store. And I'm going to be painting it with this pretty little sage color. I love this color for spring. I think it just absolutely gorgeous. One coat will do just fine on this pot. While I wait for the pots to dry, I'm going to stain these little wood cutout bunnies. I got these in a pack from the Dollar Tree, and I believe there's, I think, 12 or 15 to a pack. I'm just using a ready-made stain that I have in this little squeeze bottle. It's a combination of water, some burnt umber, and black and gray paints. And anytime I want to change the color, all I have to do is add a different color of paint. I also have these 3 larger carrots. I believe I also got these from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to be cutting off that paper grass at the top. I tried pulling it out, but it was glued in there really well, so just cutting it out with the scissors is fine. I'll end up poking the hole a little bit bigger so I can get some of the faux greenery I want to use as stems for the carrots. I'm using some of this sprig that looks a little bit like a fern, and I'm also going to be adding a little bit of boxwood, and this is just going to give these carrot stems a lot of texture. Originally, my plan was to use all 6 of these bunnies on the bottom of the pot. I ended up only being able to fit 5 of them, but I'm going to put them facing together so they kind of look like they're little kissing bunnies, and I'm just going to line them up all the way around the pot. They turned out really cute. I love this project. I think the pot would also look really cute with some of the little wood cutout eggs or maybe even some of the little mini carrots all the way around. To stuff the pot, I'm using some of this raffia and I'm just going to scrunch it up in my hands just so it gets almost into like a little ball, but has a few strands hanging out. And then I'm just going to push it down, kind of getting all the little straggly bits tucked in too. I'm just going to place the carrots inside the raffia, add that last little wood bunny and a few little greenery sprigs. And this is a perfect addition to any vignette for Easter, but it's also suitable for spring too.
If you haven't already subscribed to my channel and you like what you see so far, I'd love it if you could hit that red button. It's right here.
This project is the easiest of everything that I have today, super quick as well. I'm just taking 3 of these little plaster of Paris bunnies. I'm going to go ahead and give each of them a couple of coats of a different colored chalk paint. This one I mixed with Antique Sky and I added a little bit of navy blue, so it's sort of a bluey green color. I'm going to do the other one in a light sage, and the final one is going to be in a eucalyptus green. Once I'm done with that and they're fully dry, I'm going to give them a nice, shiny, glossy top coat, and they look just like ceramic. For pennies on the dollar, I was able to create some beautiful high-end looking decor. I am super excited to share this hack with you. I am going to be printing on flour sack cloth fabric. I have cut out a piece that is much smaller than my printer paper. You can see that here. This is one of the tricks to remember. Make it much smaller than your paper because you don't want the feeder to catch hold of that fabric and then start tearing it up or possibly jamming it into your printer. Next, you're going to use some masking tape and make sure that you tape down every little bit of that fabric. It has to be taped down completely so there's no free edges hanging around. You also need to make sure that it's as flat as possible. You can see here that I pulled this one up because it had a little bit of a wrinkle in it and I smoothed it down again, making sure that, again, everything is taped down. This will really help. If you wanted to iron your fabric, you could do that as well. I haven't tried it with anything thicker than the flour sack cloth, but I think this is absolutely amazing. One thing that I forgot to mention is that I put this on cardstock. I always have some pieces of cardstock in my stash. If you don't have white, it doesn't have to be white. It can be any type of cardstock, even a piece of scrapbook paper that is cut to size to fit into your printer. Of course, you won't be able to use the paper anymore, so just keep that in mind. Depending on your project, you might also want to make sure that your fabric is much bigger than your project. I'm using this tiny little embroidery hoop, so I just made sure that I had enough fabric. But you can see on the one side there, I got it a little bit close. So next time I've got to make sure that I put my image right smack in the middle. Now I'm going to take the larger hoop and just push it down on top of the smaller hoop and then screw it together to tighten it up. To get a nice clean fabric cut, I'm using my fabric scissors. You can use regular scissors if you want, but I just always find that it's a little harder to cut a nice even piece. So fabric scissors are the way to go if you're cutting any type of material. Just make sure that you don't cut any paper or anything with your fabric scissors because that will immediately dull the blade and you'll be struggling again. With the leftover fabric, I just cut slits in the bottom and then tore it. I'm going to make 3 little ribbon pieces out of this. I'm also going to be adding some black and white striped ribbon and a black and white butcher twine. I thought I would quickly show you how I have been learning how to make a messy bow. I always start with a long piece of twine at the bottom in the opposite direction because that's what I'm going to be using to tie everything together. And then I just start layering and changing direction of each of them. And it just really doesn't matter how you do it. It just has to look a little messy. I guess that's why it's called a messy bow. Then once everything's together, I just grab the 2 ends of the twine, tie it really tight in a knot. And I always like to shake up my bow just to kind of get it a little messier. I don't know, just to kind of pull things apart a little bit, but I'm always kind of bending it and fluffing it and shaking it. I glued the bow on top, added a flower with a button and some greenery, and I think this one turned out really pretty as well.
This galvanized pot from the Dollar Tree. And what I'm going to do with this is take a regular kitchen sponge and some chalk paint. This is Martha Stewart chalk paint in the color clay. And I'm going to dab it all the way around the pot. I just want to make sure that the lettering is covered up, but I do want a little bit of that galvanized metal to show through. The reason I'm using the sponge is because I don't want to see any brush strokes. While I wait for the pot to dry, I'm going to mix up some textured paint. I'm pouring in a latex paint. This is just something that I had left over in my house, and I'm pouring it right into a little plastic container that has a screw top lid. As you can see, I save all of my jars. I added a couple tablespoons of baking soda. Now with this technique, you want to add a little bit first and then add more if you need it. I found that I did need a little bit more just to get the consistency and the texture that I wanted. What I'm doing now is just taking this little brush and I'm pouncing it right on top of the other color, and I'm getting a really wonderful concrete kind of look. I'm getting some bigger chunks here and there and some smaller chunks, and I'm just going to keep going all the way around the pot until I get the look I want. Once the paint was almost dry, I'm taking the same sponge and the same original color, which is the darker color, and I'm just kind of sponging it on because I want to get a little bit of a deeper shade, but I still want some of that lighter color to show through. So I'm going very lightly with my sponge and blending it in. I wanted to camouflage the little skinny handles on this, so I'm taking some of this white nautical rope that I have, and I started by hot gluing a piece of it down, which is what I'm holding with my thumb, and I'm just going to go ahead and start wrapping it all the way around the handles, gluing it in a couple of spots as I go. When I got to the end of the first handle, I decided to continue the nautical rope underneath the rim of the bucket all the way around. This way I didn't have to make any extra cuts to stop the rope, but it also made it look more high end and complete. Where I had to cut the ends, I just kind of let those edges hang down on either side of the handle, but I am taking a little bit of Mod Podge and I'm just going to run it across those edges so they don't fray even more. I have a new obsession, and that is printing on white tissue paper. I take a little piece of tissue paper that's just a touch smaller than the printer paper. I tape it across the top and about halfway down the sides, and then I run it through my printer like usual. And this is what I get, a beautiful little label that I can decoupage right on top of my project. I'm going to use Mod Podge and put a thin layer where my label is going to sit. Then I always use my brush to pick up my little label because they are really thin and sometimes it's hard to just place it right where you want it to be. If you have it on your brush, you can just kind of eyeball it and set it down right in the center. Making sure that I have a little bit of Mod Podge always on my brush. You don't want to have your brush too dry because that will tear the tissue paper. Start from the center and work your way out, gently pushing the wrinkles and the air bubbles out. This is a textured pot, so I know I'm going to have some wrinkles and bubbles in it, but if you have too many, you can do what I'm doing now. You just take your brush, make sure again it has a tiny bit of Mod Podge on it, just pounce up and down on top of the bubbles and the wrinkles, and they will just get pushed right into the Mod Podge underneath, and all of those bubbles will disappear. Now I'm going to blend in the edges of that tissue paper just a little bit. So I'm taking my sponge and I'm taking the lighter color, not the baking soda texture, just the regular paint. And I'm using the edge of the kitchen sponge to just go all the way around and camouflage that tissue paper. I also dabbed just a wee bit on top of the tissue paper where it's black just to show a little bit more texture and distressing. I'm going to be adding some eggs into this, but I wanted to show you a trick. I don't like filling all of my buckets and containers with so much foam or styrofoam that I end up wasting it. So what I do is take an old piece of cardboard, and I always save the sides and the lids from my Amazon boxes. The boxes themselves come in handy, but I always use the flaps for this. I'm going to cut out a circle so it fits into the bucket about an inch down from the top, and then I'm going to hot glue it in place. To camouflage the cardboard, I'm just going to scatter some reindeer moss all over the top of it. I'm not even going to glue it down because I might change my mind after Easter and use this bucket for something else. What I'm doing now is just taking some black paint and a stiff brush and flicking the paint onto the eggs so they get a little speckled. So I've got this sweet little bunny from the dollar store, and I went ahead and glued him down to the cardboard, and now I'm just going to glue the eggs just right onto the moss because they're not really going to go anywhere, but I just don't want any of them to fall out, and I can also then place them where I want them to be. Please excuse my black finger there. I didn't go and wash my hands after I flicked the eggs, and now it looks really awful seeing it here while I'm editing, so I do apologize. I've got some tiny eggs that I'm going to add into the mix as well, and I'm even going to give him one to hold in his little paws. I wanted to put some type of little sign above the bunny's head, so I decided to grab this wood slice, drill a hole in it so it would hold a bamboo skewer. I'm going to go ahead and glue the skewer in, then cover the skewer with some white butcher twine, and then write 5 cents on it and pop it in behind the bunny's head. I think this project turned out super cute. This little bunny with the sleeping position in the wreath with all of the eggs and the pretty flowers is just absolutely adorable. Now, if I would have been thinking this would have been really great for my next project because it's a round shape, but I only have one of these, so I ended up doing this to it instead. I'm taking a piece of white tissue paper and just adding a glue stick along it and putting it on top of this. I wanted this picture to be not quite so bright, more of a vintage look, something old and something that's been around for a while. Those colors are pretty, but again, just too bright for my style. So I thought this would work, and I think it did. I have a specific size frame that I'm going to put this bunny into, so I'm using my paper trimmer to trim down the edges. I also didn't have a larger piece of tissue paper and I didn't want any seams in there, so this ended up turning out to be the best project for this bunny anyway. I'm going to use the glue stick again and just apply this bunny sheet to the backing of the frame, which is right here. I believe it's an 8 by 10. Since there's a little bit of the backing still peeking through, I'm going to take some strips of drop cloth and make somewhat of a mat for this bunny picture. I'm going to just glue the strips with hot glue right along the bottom and the sides of the bunny, and then I'll be able to put it into the frame and there won't be any of the brown showing. I'll just trim off the extra edges and it will fit perfectly into the frame. The frame that I'm using was something that I've repurposed a couple of times. It had black on the bottom. I gave it one coat of Parisian gray chalk paint and just went over it very lightly with my sanding block to bring out some of the black and some of the original wood.
For this project, I'm using two of my Dollarama bunnies again, taking my flat Rust-Oleum matte finish spray paint. This is just the clear, and what this does is take some of the shine away from these bunnies so the paint has a better opportunity to stick. I'm going to give these two bunnies a few coats of white chalk paint. I did have to go over this 3 times to make sure that I got really good coverage, but I really liked the little dimpled texture of these rabbits because it still showed up even with 3 coats of paint. I love creating tissue paper transfers. That's what I'm going to call them from now on because they are transferring an image onto an object. You use tissue paper to print off using your regular printer, a laser jet or an inkjet. I have an inkjet, it works just fine. You use Mod Podge and you attach it to your project. Make sure you have some Mod Podge on your item first and then very gently lay your tissue paper on top. When you're smoothing it out, I always like to start from the middle and work my way out and always have a good amount of Mod Podge on my brush so I don't tear the tissue paper. Once they were dry, I sprayed them with a clear sealer. This one happened to have a little bit of shine to it and I really love how they turned out. I picked up this bunny on a little wood pedestal or candlestick at my local Dollarama store, and it is actually quite pretty just on its own. The back isn't finished, so that would be something that I would change anyway. And the florals were pretty, but just really not my style. So what I'm doing here is just painting the top portion of it gray. I'm also going to be painting the back of it gray, so it has the same look on both sides. And I'm going to leave the thickness on the sides of the bunny in white. I've got a buffalo check black and white napkin from the Dollar Tree that I've cut down into some strips, and I'm going to use Mod Podge and place it all along the side of the bunny in that thick spot. That's why I wanted to keep it white. So I'm going to very gently just press it in with my fingers and then continue working all the way around the one edge of the bunny. And then I'll do the other side too. Once the Mod Podge had dried, I just took this rough emery board and very gently just started sanding off the excess tissue paper. So the main reason that I painted the sides of the bunny gray is just to camouflage those bright colors from the florals underneath. Now I'm going to take a dry brush with some white chalk paint and go over the bunny and do it pretty heavily. I'm starting off fairly light to make sure that I don't go too heavy, but I end up doing about 3 or 4 layers of dry brushing just to bring out a little bit more brightness with the white chalk paint. I got this set of silicone floral stamps from beebeecraft.com. And if you're not familiar with Beebee Craft, they have a ton of crafting supplies that are really not that expensive. And I do have a link for them down in my description box. I'm going to peel off these silicone stamps and then place them down the way I would stamp them to create a pattern. I'm starting off with some of the larger florals, and then I'm going to pull off some of the smaller ones and then add some bits of greenery as well. Now I'm going to take what's called the mask, which is literally just the sheet that covers up the stamps, and you'll be able to just press this down and that will become your surface of stamping. So all of the stamps will stick to this piece of plastic, and then you'll be able to ink it up and use it over and over again. The ink I use is just from a dollar store. It was $4 or $5 for this ink pad, and I really like it because the sponge part of it is nice and soft, so you get really good ink adhesion on your stamps. I'm going to very carefully place it on my rabbit and then hold it down with one hand and then use the other hand or fingers to just press down very gently, trying really hard not to move the stamps. I like how this pattern turned out. I think it's really pretty. It has just enough amount of greenery and stems, and this looks so pretty against the rustic background of the bunny. I'm going to go ahead and ink up the stamps again and then just turn the stamps so they don't go on exactly the same way, and then I'll be able to just fill up the bunny. I think I've finally mastered the messy bow, and I really enjoy making them now. I used to kind of dread making them because they wouldn't turn out, but I've kind of embraced the not so perfect look of them. I'm taking some of this wider ribbon from the Dollar Tree in a beautiful gray color, and I'm just going to be trimming it down into 3 narrower pieces. I also have some black and white twine. I have some cotton rope that I'm going to be pulling apart, and I also have some buffalo check ribbon that I'll also be cutting down a little bit narrower. It's been easier for me to lay down a piece of twine up and down like you see me doing here, and then laying my ribbons across, and that just makes sure that I have something to tie everything in place once I'm done. So I'm just going to start layering my ribbons in not really a pattern, but just kind of grabbing them, moving them around every which way, and just trying to make sure that they all stay in place. This gray one was really giving me a hard time. Once I felt that it was fluffy enough, I took the piece of twine and then just simply tied a really snug knot, making sure that it was in the center. I fluffed it up a little bit and kind of bent some of the ribbons down so they'd be hanging, and then just trimmed off any of them that were a little too long. Then I'm going to just glue this right on top of my bunny and give him a sweet little bow right at his neck. I finally found my stash of buttons, so I added a white one. I'm also going to add a few little greenery sprigs and some pretty pink flowers. For the final touch, I added a couple of pieces of greenery to the bottom of the candlestick and added a couple of pink flowers there too. I really love how my bunny turned out, and I hope you love him too.
Thanks so much for watching. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and the like button. This all helps me get noticed more on YouTube. Have a wonderful day.